Okay, so we're going to look at the Solutions Architect Professional Exam Guide for SAP C01. A reminder that this is a 75 question exam. You have 180 minutes to take the 75 questions. And it is purely multiple right answer, like multiple choice or multiple right answer. So there's no hands-on component yet to these labs. Now, I say that, this current version, you're not going to run into that. So there's no issue with this. But like if you, for example, were taking the SysOps Associates, there is a hands-on lab portion. Amazon is pushing to put hands-on components into their labs. So, sorry, into their certifications. So you're going to see that evolve over time. Now, recommendation is that you get 2 or more years experience of designing and deploying on AWS. Obviously they expect you to have all the kind of core stuff that you had for Solutions Architecture Associate. They're not going to require you to know like different things about application or machine learning or any of those pieces, but it is, like I said, multiple choice, multiple response. Now, this exam only includes 65 questions that are going to affect your score. There are 10 unscored questions. Now, are you going to know which is which? No. But the reason I share that with you is don't let your, what do we call it? Your spirit, your motivation get daunted if all of a sudden you get a question that looks like it's out of left field. I actually just had to take the machine learning specialty exam, and they asked me questions that were nowhere on the study guide, nowhere in the enablement class, nowhere in any of the classes around machine learning. But I knew that 10 of the questions were going to be out of left field. And sure enough, I could probably pick those questions out because there was nothing on anything about the services they were asking about. So do note that it's a pass-fail exam, and you need a minimum passing score of 750, which is true for both of the professional level exams, right? So it does show when you do it, whether you pass. It will not give you your score until much later. So when you get your certification and it shows up in your certification portal, which we're going to look at in just a second, that's when you can actually download what's called your score report. But at the exam, both proctored and otherwise, you're only going to see whether you passed or failed, because that's all they're going to tell you. And they're not going to tell you which questions you got right or wrong. They will tell you which domains you did well in and which domains you probably need to work on. So other things that are worth looking at is that just note that about a third of the exam is about design for new solutions. A third, give or take, right, a little less than a third, is about continuous improvement, right? So improving existing setups. So not designing for new solutions, but improving existing, edifications. Then a lot about migration. So, about a seventh, and then about an eighth or so for organizational complexity and cost control. So as you can see, the bulk of this is either designing for new solutions or improving existing solutions. Now, what that explicitly means is all listed here. One recommendation I have is that I would highly recommend that you scroll through the exam guide. And if you see a concept or a technology or a service that you know nothing about, you probably want to note that, because you're probably going to pay extra special attention when that pops up, either in your white papers, your training review, because you are taking your classes, or in the practice exams. So if you don't know, for example, what the 6 R's are, as far as like rehosting, replatforming, reversing, that kind of thing, then you're gonna want to kind of get connected with that. Other like database transfer mechanisms like DMS, right? SCT, like the schema conversion tool, you're gonna want to be comfortable with those as well. And they're gonna give you a bunch of situational things where it's like, hey, we want to introduce an abstraction layer for a high volume front end application that dumps messages over to the back end synchronously. You're going to want to know that they're going to want you to loosely couple that, because that's really tightly coupled, that kind of thing. Different cutover strategies, by the way, as far as deployments, including things like in-place updates, blue, green, canary, linear. They're going to want you to know like exactly how that functions. And then a bunch of things around cost control. Do you understand when you're going to get charged by AWS and when you're not? They're not going to ask you numbers, by the way. Amazon never tests you on things that could frequently change, like numbers or, instance, not t-shirt sizes, but instance types. You know, they're not going to ask you what a M6, G is per se. They might want you to know that an M6 is a general purpose machine. And then continuous improvement for existing solutions, which can include troubleshooting, improving reliability, improving rapport. Like this, it mainly relates to the 6 pillars, right? So they're going to want you to be able to improve it along most of the 6 pillars, like security, performance, costing, operational excellence, reliability. I say 6 pillars, by the way, because some of you are like, wait, Michael, there's only 5. They added sustainability in November. You're not going to get tested on sustainability, but just know that there's now a 6th pillar, right? So, and so highly recommend that you run through the exam guide, pick out the pieces where you know you're weak, because you just want to pay attention to that. Beyond that, let me show you where you're going to put your exam voucher in if you haven't already. The voucher, by the way, comes from a company called XVoucher. Amazon's in a relationship with them. Has been for a while. The email does look a little sketchy, by the way. Looks like spam. When you sign in, just know, by the way, that they have moved a lot of their training over to a new site called Skill Builder, which I'm going to show you in a second. This is where the supplemental labs were for your professional exam. So hopefully you've seen it before. When you sign in, by the way, to schedule an exam, unless you know for a fact that you're part of Booz's APN team, you're going to sign on the left. This is going to use an Amazon account, not an AWS account. This does not have to be a Booz email. As a matter of fact, I generally recommend that you don't use a Booz email for this. I recommend that you log in with whatever level of semi-professional personal email you want to use. Once you get signed in, right, it's going to ask you to go to your account. It's going to log you into a site called CertMetrics, which is going to have a completely different layout, but you're going to see the brand in the upper left-hand side. Your candidate ID is up in the right-hand side. And by the way, if you don't have an account here, you're going to end up creating one. Again, just use an AWS account. Once you're here, notice that you can register for exam, you can request exam accommodations, you can manage PSI exams, you can manage Pearson VUE exams. If I remember correctly, the vouchers are only good for Pearson VUE. They're not good for PSI exams, which is fine. Kind of prefer Pearson VUE. Here, by the way, you can find your profile, any exam registration, like if I had pending exams up here, any exam history, like, if you've taken an exam, any achieved certifications, any of the benefits, because just know, as you pass these, you actually get benefits such as pre-practice exam vouchers, free 50% discounts on your exam. So if you already have a certification that's valid, you might want to look here, because if you're going to pay for your own exam, obviously, because then you can just claim the benefit in question. And then they do use digital badging, which is provided by a company called Credly, which, will show up on your LinkedIn profile, and you can embed it. People can use this to verify that you actually have a certification. So probably the most important part of this whole thing is that under exam history, you can download your score report. So I'm going to download my machine learning score report. Notice here that I got an 836, which is like barely a B, but that's okay. That was a tough exam, honestly. So just know that you get to know whether you pass fail right away, but you won't get your candidate score until later. They used to provide general feedback about your score, in the general competencies, which they still do, but they've gotten less granular with it. They don't tell you any of the subsections, which is what they used to do. Now they just tell you, hey, did you meet it or fail? And so you might pass the entire overall exam, but you might fail in a particular domain. So something to be mindful of. So this, by the way, doesn't actually tell me my percentage of competency. It only tells me that I met competencies. They used to tell you, by the way, how did you do? And they don't tell you that anymore. Okay. So that's probably the most important section, is just remember that under exam history, you can actually download your score report. Okay. Our whole purpose for coming here, though, was to tell you where to stick the voucher. So let's go to exam registration. And actually, you could also go to home and just say, hey, I want to schedule with, register for an exam. Once you're here, it's going to take you to this page anyway. And then what you do is you choose your exam. So let's say we're doing Solutions Architect Pro. we're going to schedule with Pearson VUE. Couple of caveats. First, it's going to log you into Pearson VUE. And you're going to have this option of, do you do it at a test center or do it online at home? I will tell you that the testing centers are very tightly controlled, very cleaned. And if the testing center is open, then I got to tell you, I would recommend you going to a testing center, but that's a recommendation you do to your level of comfort, right? Call the testing center, flesh them out, see how comfortable you are with their like COVID protocols. If you are even remotely uncomfortable, don't go to the testing center, right? Just don't do it. You're going to have enough stress taking the exam. You don't need to add other concerns and worries on top of that. But let's say that you're going to take it at home. I got to tell you, please make sure that if you choose this option, you actually click on these, run the system test, read the space about acceptable spaces, because I got to tell you, oh, this is a new one. I haven't seen the comfort aid list. Hold on one second. There's a comfort aid list, medical devices, eyeglasses. Oh, wow. Look at that. Oxygen tank. Huh. Look at this. Face mask, gloves, not permitted. Wow. Wow. Interesting. I had no idea. Okay, so just make sure you read this, because acceptable spaces, by the way, has things like, do you have the right equipment? Can you capture photos of all 4 sides of your desk? You can't have 2 active monitors on your desk, by the way. You can't have like anything other than a required video camera. Your desk has to be cleared. All your watches and stuff have to be off. There's a lot of restrictions. And so I just want you to be prepared for that. You also need 1 photo ID. If you go to the testing center, by the way, they require 2. So don't forget that I said that. You're going to need 2 photo IDs if you go to a testing center for some reason. The other thing is you're going to show up 30 minutes early. If this is your first time taking an exam in the last 2 years, online proctored, you have to show up 30 minutes early. It's just going to make the whole thing less stressful. You're going to have to take pictures of all 4 sides of your desk. You probably can't see it, but right over here in the background, I actually have a little table with a laptop on it. That's where I took my machine learning specialty exam. That's also where I took the DevOps Engineering Pro exam, because I can take pictures of all 4 sides of the computer. It's also hardwired into the internet, power supply, and there's no other extraneous equipment. Everything else is out of reach. So it doesn't have to be out of the room, but it definitely has to be out of reach. So, just something to keep in mind. So you're going to read all that. And then what's going to happen is they're going to give you options for written, which is cool. I love that they have so many options. It's a little frustrating they don't have as many options when it comes to verbal, because you only have options for English and Japanese. They're going to check to make sure that you are signing up for what you want to sign up for. And then they're going to ask you a bunch of questions about data processing and facial recognition and limited license and blah, blah, blah. The other pieces, though, that are in here that are also super important is they're going to tell you what acceptable identification is. They're going to tell you how do you cancel your appointment. Usually 48 hours to 24 hours is the acceptable time frame. So, and just know they'll tell you like where to go in exam day. In exam day, by the way, you just log back into your certification account, click on Manage Pearson VUE Exams. It will take you to Pearson VUE, and then you can just start it from there. They will send you an email, by the way, with all of this information 7 days before, 4 days before, and 1 day before. Note that if you try to reschedule more than twice, they're going to ask you to cancel. And it says 24 hours. You better do 48 hours, because they have the right to say no. Like, they don't have to give you your money back. So I would do it 48 hours ahead of time. Notice that here that you're not going to be able to go to the bathroom. You can't drink any water. You won't get any scratch paper. There's no breaks of any kind. You can't put your hands on your mouth. You can't talk to yourself. You've been warned. They're going to warn you, by the way, so don't freak out. Like, I frequently would be like, oh, let's see. A company wants to, and they would immediately be like, Mr. Forrester, can you take your hands away from your mouth, please, sir? And please do not mumble or talk to yourself while you're taking the exam. And then the first time I did it again. And like, Mr. Forrester, this is your second warning. We apologize, but our policy states that you can't do this as this. If you do it again, you will forfeit your exam. Well, guess what? I didn't touch my face again. So problems with having a beard. All right. Then you just agree, and it's going to ask you for your spoken language, which, cool that they have Japanese, wish they had more. And then what's going to happen here is that you're then going to choose the date that would work. So let's say we wanted to take it tomorrow, the 29th, which could be pretty soon. And then I usually convert it to 24-hour time because then there's no confusion about AM and PM. Not, I mean, I know it clearly states it, but like, it's just clearer for me at least. So then when you pick a time, by the way, pick a time when you're fresh without coffee, no coffee, okay? No stimulants. Here's the problem. If you take a stimulant and you go take a 3-hour exam, you're gonna want to go to the bathroom. Just, you're awake. So if you want to drink coffee in the morning and then schedule your exam at 10, that sounds great. But please do not, can't tell you how many people have taken a stimulant and they're like, I had to go pee for the last hour of the exam. It's like, yeah, that's what happens. So for me, fresh is typically around 10 or 11 a.m. So let's say 10. And then what they're going to do is they're going to ask you to confirm everything. Now, this is where your voucher goes. Right here at the very last stage, next to last stage, actually, where you would put in your billing information, you're going to put the voucher in and you're going to hit this apply button, which will actually turn, gray or black once you've put a voucher code in there. So this will turn, and then what will happen is that I believe all the card information disappears. They might still keep your address information. You click on next, and I'm not going to do that because I don't want to pay for it. Is that they're going to ask you to finalize, you hit submit on that last page after they verify all the information. And then they're going to immediately send you an email and say, hey, you're registered for an exam. Ideally, at that point in time, you immediately put on your calendar the exam plus 30 minutes. Just like go ahead and add 30 minutes because that's when you should be there. It's 30 minutes ahead of your exam appointment. So like my exam appointment was at like 2:15 on last Saturday, and I took it at 1:45. Like that's when I got in, right? And by the way, I needed all that time. I literally right up to like, I think it was like 2:12 when I was actually finished taking the pictures, getting the space set up, putting all my stuff away. That's how long it took me. Okay. So put some thought into how you're going to do this the day of. Make sure, by the way, the kids are out. There's no dogs or pets with collars, no cats, nothing. They're going to acoustically fingerprint your room. And if there's a dog running around with a collar, they're going to interrupt you a lot. If someone walks in the room, they, depending on what they say, you need to immediately have them exit. So just tell your kids and your family you're not available. If they walk in and yell something like an answer to an exam question, you fail instantly. I'm just saying that because it's like, who actually does that? But anyway, yeah. One of my buddies threatened one time to come over and be like, the answer is code commit. It's like, oh God, don't do that. All right. So then we hit next, you hit submit, and then you would get all the emails, and they're going to email you 7 days before, 4 days before, and the day of. So you're going to have plenty of exposure, right, to this information, all of these pieces. Okay. And that includes the voucher entry. So just remember, number one thing, voucher code goes right here. Okay. Any questions about that whole process at this point in time?
I have general questions, Mike. First thing is, after you're done with the exam or before you start the exam, they will ask for your experience, how much experience you have. You just entered those information, right? So does it make any difference, in the exam overall, result?
In other words, do they change your scoring requirement or they change the exam in response to those survey questions? No.
No. Okay. Second thing is like they're talking about 750 points, right? So it does not it comes around 56.25 right answers. So how do they calculate like out of 75? So you need to be 57 right answers. How do they?
So remember, there's 65 questions that count, not 75, right? So 65
Yes.
of those questions actually count towards your score.
Yes.
So out of that, like it's easy for the associate exams because only 50 questions out of 65 count. So you can have to do the math, right? Because it's like 1% per 60, each question when it's 65 questions, right?
It's around 47.75 or something. So
yeah. But I just want to point this out. You have to, at a minimum, get 750 to pass sometimes passing is 760 or 770, depending on who's been taking the exam recently. So it's a little bit of comparative scoring against recent takers of the test. So just so we're clear about that. It's not just 750, right? It's a very complicated algorithm basically to pass. So I would probably target like 50 questions, honestly, not 47, because that will guarantee that you pass. The score never goes above plus or minus 20 points, but they will actually score up and down, above 750 in order for you to pass. So it's not just that number. That's the minimum passing score. It could be 760, it could be 770. They don't say that, but that's how it works.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so I mean, if like, and if you're counting questions like this one, I know I got right, and these I know I got wrong, you need to get 50 questions to pass. So just to make that up front.
Do you know what is the average percentage of people who can pass?
They don't release those statistics, Alan, so I don't know. They don't tell us. People have guessed, right? And some of the testing centers have independently published, their guesses, right? But they don't tell you, right? But that's the reason, Alan, that they shift the score plus or minus 20, is because if they have made the test a little too hard, then they shift it down. If it's, if they try to be accommodating. So, but 750 is typically the minimum passing score. I know that adds an element of uncertainty. And I think the reason why our methodology targets 90 percentile on the practice exams is because of that little shift, right? We recommend that you are shooting for an 800 or plus, obviously, right? Because the goal here is not just to pass the exam, but also have the knowledge, which is why you have an extensive list of like white papers and other things in your program certification guide, plus hands-on lab access, because we want you to be able to obviously do the role. But the other reason for that is that we also want to push you a little over and above, because the pro exams are like that. They are tough, right? And so, as people are scoring higher and higher on those exams, right, they're trying to adjust the answers to the questions, but they'll also adjust the minimum passing score in order to make that a little harder or a little easier. Okay. So bottom line, you want to go for 50 questions to pass. Now, I got to tell you a funny story is that when I just took the machine learning exam, I've been doing machine learning operations since like 2017. So not as long as I've been doing cloud. I've been doing cloud since 2011. I've been in the industry for 25 years. What's funky to me is that I was certain that I had failed the machine learning exam, because even though I had done a tremendous amount of deduction and study and felt comfortable with all the various like regression types and classification types and all the other components that make up machine learning, I thought, man, I'm not feeling really confident, because they kept asking me questions about services that were nowhere on any of the study guides. And then of course, you just saw my score. So I actually got an 836, which is well above passing. What was funny is that, they said that, the weight of those, the impact is, which is why I mentioned it to you, the impact of those questions, in which I didn't actually know the answer, because they were probably the gimme questions about Amazon forecasts and other services that just got released. That's why I mentioned that to you, is that don't let it break your spirit that they're going to ask you questions and they're going to be so far off the material that you're just going to be like, So don't let that undercut you, because like in my case, it actually did. I thought, man, as I hit submit, I'm going to fail this exam. Nope. I let the impact of those unscored questions throw my perception off. So that's why I share that with you. Okay. So that covers all the details for the exam. 75 questions, 65 scored questions, 750 minimum passing score, plus or minus. You don't want to shoot for about 50 questions. This is where the exam voucher goes. Any questions about any of that before we move on to the other options?
There's no way to switch from Pearson VUE to PSI with that voucher, right?
Not that I'm aware of, actually. I think that X
Okay.
voucher only provides Pearson VUE vouchers. You could contact them. You could contact X voucher and see.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we've ever done that. And I think we've asked in the past and they said no.
It's a lot easier to get PSI around here.
Yeah. You know what? If you want, email Greg and ask him. Maybe he has another option that I'm not aware of because he's the one
Okay.
who handles all the logistics for that. So maybe he's gotten something up his sleeve. Other questions? Okay. Let's talk about a few more logistics, and then just so you know, we are going to take just a short break, right? Because this is a 3-hour session, so we'll take a short 10 or 15-minute break, and then we're going to focus more on the practice exam questions and how to break down the exam. Other things that are probably worth noting is that you got this certification study guide. I am actually going to update this, not because any of the links are wrong. They're not, just because to clarify, like, for example, your supplemental labs are in your student portal. They're not in Basecamp anymore. That just recently changed and we hadn't updated the document. But the other thing is that notice there's a tremendous amount of white paper reading. This is the pro level exam. And I apologize profusely, but like, this is how this rolls, right? Is that there's a tremendous amount of white paper reading, how to manage infrastructure to scale, DR and backup options, which is all going to, cover your, rehosting and replatforming and all that. Different things on, serverless solutions and a little bit on data stores. There's probably more that you could study, but it would take an inordinate amount of time, right? This is about, at this level, it's supposed to be about 12 weeks of study at about 5 hours a week. So 60 hours of additional study. Some of you are going to go faster. Some of you will go slower. That's just like the way it rolls. And this is just an attempt to get you there. If you get done with this and you're like, Michael, there's more that I want to study. Normally what I would do at that point is I would refer you to the official AWS role ramp up guide. And if you haven't seen this before, if you just search for AWS ramp up guides, you can get it, but I'm going to post it in chat here as well. These are guides that offer you, like, give you all of the free training and services that AWS has for a particular role or a particular technology. Now, for architects, it's a little easy because if we download the guide, this mainly covers the associate's level path. And then what happens is that it then rolls over to professional. Now, I didn't write this guide or co-write it with them, but I'm just going to tell you right now. Step 4 is the associate's level exam. And then step 5 is to do this and then move on to the professional level exam. That is not accurate. I don't know what they were thinking by just putting 6 items in here, but this is why we gave you the ramp up guide we did, because this is weak T. This is not going to get you past the exam. And so I'm not exactly sure. I've written this several times about this. I'm like, this is not good enough. You're not going to study an additional whatever hours plus take the class and be able to pass the exam. That's not going to happen. So just stick with our study guide. I know that for some of this, you're like, Michael, why are we re-reviewing the well-architected framework? Well, you just saw the exam guide. The exam guide is going to have you apply the concepts of the well-architected framework to both new solutions and existing solutions. So that's why we have you review it. There's a bunch of migration pieces here as well. You can add other ones. And just know that you can always go to AWS Skill Builder if you want, and you can search for additional classes, especially if you're like, Michael, I don't really know, like, for example, migration a whole lot, right? So what you can do is you can actually just type in migration and see what kind of classes they have on Skill Builder around migration, which, by the way, there's the Cloud Endure stuff. Here's, general strategies, right? There's probably like, different things like database migration might be useful to do it, not in French unless that's one of your languages. So just know that you can find additional trainings in here. This is a free by AWS training collection, includes a bunch of really cool stuff. So just know we give you this guide, you're going to run through it. You probably need to spend some time at least writing down the broad strokes of these white papers. And then you've got some digital trainings here as well. Now, notice that when you get to the orange, it switches from a bunch of expertise building about how the system should work, and it switches to, let's get some hands-on labs. I've got 2 options for you for this. One, because you're a Booz employee, let me actually just close this down really quick so I can get my tabs back. Because you're a Booz employee, you actually have the option of going to amazon.quicklabs.com. Now, this is different from webhquicklabs.com or AWS.quicklabs.com, which is probably where you might have done your class labs. Amazon.quicklabs.com is the public side of Quicklabs. If you haven't already, use your Booz account to actually create a login. And if you do this, what will happen in, let's see, I think I have to sign in here. Oh, no, I'm gonna use my Google. Once you sign in, you're going to get a bunch of credits here. Those credits are going to go up and down because they're shared by a bunch of other students with Booz. If they hit 0 or get close to 0, by the way, we get a notification and refresh them. But like this is just me. So these are my personal credits, not your shared credits. Now you might say, Michael, why do I care about this? So just so you know, if you need more hands-on experience with a particular technology, about 80% of the technologies are here. So if you need more experience with CloudFront, for example, because you don't really like grok the concepts, there are, mid-level to high-level labs in here about how to stream dynamic content, caching static files, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you're like, Michael, I have never touched Lambda. I really need to get some experience messing with Lambda. Just go out here and search for Lambda and then look for the labs. Now, this is a whole quest, by the way. This isn't a serverless lab. The labs are in orange. But notice there's some free ones. Here's a CloudWatch events lab. Here's a lab with DynamoDB and Kinesis streams, like if you've never touched Kinesis, right? So there's some really great labs in here. This does not require your own individual personal AWS account. They will create an AWS account for you, okay? So this is free to you, being a Booz employee taking classes with us. You can now log into this and you're now like on an allow list that allows you to share in the credit pool. Remember that this is the only one that you are really required to do last name _ first name at bah.com. If you sign up with any other email address, you will not get access to the free labs. Okay. So any questions about the program study guide and its listings, or how to get access to free labs so you can get more hands-on experience?
So it looks like some of the white papers are deprecated when we click on, right? So
Yeah, they do that a lot. Let's see here. Give me an example of one if you don't mind, Banu.
I actually don't remember, but one of the paper that I clicked from here, they mentioned that it's deprecated, but still they have that white paper. So
Yeah, so just know that because it usually says deprecated in the link. So let's go take a look at one. Huh. Yeah, these should all be links to the direct abstracts. So let's go take a look and see. Yeah, these should all work. Yeah, these all seem to be functioning. Huh. That makes me wonder if maybe you had an old version or something. Updated March 9th, 2021. That sounds right. Because none of the papers should be like have not been updated. It's like for 2 years. This one, by the way, says this has been archived. So in that case, it usually, by the way, puts a link on the paper that says this is where you would go to get an updated paper. But like that one is out of date. So actually we do need to update that one. I mean, they do that stuff all the time. Okay. So that one is out of date. So I'll update that one. Let's see. Let's check the others really quick. Yep, it looks solid. Yep, and that one's been archived. And so this is infrastructure event readiness. Yeah, so we'll have to check on that one too. Okay, good. All right. If that happens, by the way, it usually refers you to a place where you can get an updated copy of the paper. Sometimes they've just retired them. All right, so those two. So Banu, thank you for saying something. I'll make sure that's updated today, actually. So I'll get that back out to you. All right, so we'll replace those applications to a new region and infrastructure at scale. Okay. Cool, thank you. Did you see any other errors or corrections?
I think that should be.
Okay. All right, fix this one too. Do know, by the way, that there is a link to the supplemental labs for this, for the pro exam. So if you need a list in that sheet, it actually will have a link to the various Amazon Quick Labs, including their duration and just kind of like their general costs. Obviously, you can do any lab out there that speaks to you. There is one other thing to share, and this I don't think is anywhere on the listing at all. Let me just close this down. Where are you? Oh, so AWS has a bunch of public labs. This link, of all the links I've posted, you should catch this link, right? This is a public workshop that you can do at a 100, 200, or 300 level. You'll have to use your own personal AWS account. And let me just make sure I'm clear on this caveat. Do not create an AWS account with your bah.com email address. They will call you, so don't do that. But operational excellence, if you look, there's 100, 200 labs. Security has 300 level advanced labs. Reliability has 300 level labs. Performance efficiency only has 100 level labs. But like, so just so you know, and sustainability, which was just added, now has 300 level labs, right? So just know is that if you need to like really drive home your understanding, for example, of security at this level, these advanced labs, of which there's a bunch of them, will do that, right? If you're like, hey, I need to understand that reliability at a high level. And just to give you an example, let's say we're doing the health checks, right? This, Seth did this one, that's funny. This will basically walk through, and you have to have an AWS account, but it'll walk you through what the cost will be. This is, by the way, if you leave it up for a day, don't leave it up for a day. Don't do that, right? And then this will basically walk you through the entire like process. And you click on Start Lab. It takes you how to deploy the application, walks you through all the ins and outs. So, these labs are step by step, but they're going to walk you through how to set up and do these things. So if you need other labs, workshops.aws, I always get that backwards. You can always grab some at workshops.aws if you need like more like labs on a particular topic. Like let's say you need to understand more about, I think migration is out here, like databases, for example, or monitoring or security. There are other workshops out here that will give you this. And then there's also AWS workshops.io, which are more like modernization workshops. So between those three links, you should have plenty of options for elevated hands-on, hands-on labs if you need it, right? To drive a concept deeper. So just know they're here. Okay, at this point, does anyone feel like they don't have enough access to hands-on labs to like drive concepts deeper, or know exactly what they should be doing as far as like the expertise building with the white papers and then the possibility of throwing labs in there? Does everyone feel good about this? Everyone good?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about this last little piece. So if you're following the guide, after you do the white papers and after you follow through doing the training, you are going to do an exam readiness digital training, which is useful, and ignore that Lenovo Learning. I was like, why does it say that? I clicked into it and it is actually the exam readiness for professional. I don't know why it says Lenovo. I think their hyperlink is wrong. Anyway, then what's going to happen is that obviously this is where you would register for the exam, but then how do you know you're ready? So notice that there's literally these colors used to be by week, by the way. Notice there's like traditionally there was like 3 weeks of exam practice training. This is all done on Tutorials Dojo. Now, Tutorials Dojo is run by a gentleman named John Bonzo, who's also on Udemy. His practice exams are by far the best we've seen thus far. So I highly recommend that you stick with him. I wouldn't necessarily do somebody else's unless you just feel like you have tons of extra time, like you're on the bench or whatever. But when you click on this solutions architecture training, it'll take you right to the exam. And then I just want to mention this is that if we look at how these exams are set up, there's really one way you could approach this, maybe two ways if you're interested. So first of all, note that they have time mode exams. You're not going to use those. They will not give you the answer until the very end. And I want you to use these as study exams, not just practice exams. The review mode exams are where you're going to spend most of your time. Now, notice that there's also section-based exams if you want to do it by section. And they're coming out with topic-based exams. So this is not new to you. So you all should be fine if you actually do the review mode exams. But let's go take a look at this. I actually used the ones in Udemy. I actually just relatively recently got access to these, although it might have been like July. Time is so weird in the pandemic now. By the way, John's website is good, but slow. So don't be surprised if you click on something and you're like, why is this taking so long? Now, what will happen is that I want you to do one of the sets of the professional review mode questions again and again until you can get a 90%. And then I want you to grab another set. And I don't care which one of the 4 it is. I want you to do one until you can get 90%. I want you to do another one until you can get 90%. And you might say, well, Michael, am I not just memorizing the answers? Well, kind of, not really. So for example, here's an example question. Company's got more than 50 accounts under orgs, all the accounts deployed to a single region only, right? To enable routing across all accounts, they each have a transit gateway to a centralized transit gateway. Each VPC has an internet gateway and NAT gateway to provide activity. As a security requirement, they must have a centrally managed rule-based filtering solution for outbound traffic on all AWS accounts under its organization. It's expected that the peak outbound traffic for each zone will not exceed 25 gigs. Okay. So this, by the way, question is basically saying, look, I gave you just a bunch of ancillary, kind of almost unnecessary information. Some of it's unnecessary. But I gave you some limits, right? I basically need to have a centrally managed rule-based filtering solution for outbound internet traffic on all accounts. And it's not going to go above 25 gigabits per second. So a couple of things, right, is that which service, first of all, will meet these requirements specifically. Now, if you're familiar, you probably know that the AWS firewall service, right, would actually do this. And the firewall manager in particular can actually do this across the entire system. And it will manage, WAFs, security groups, and network firewalls. And if you're not familiar, network firewalls is a new service that basically, relatively, that allows you to basically, do filter checking. So then it's like, well, which of these would make sense? Now, so then knowing what you know about the services, then you kind of have to go like figure it out. Now, I'm not going to overanalyze this because this isn't the point. Like getting this right isn't the point, right? But I'm just going to throw this out there. The reason I wanted you to show you this is that you just got a sample of the entire scenario question. What's going to happen is that John's going to tell you in Tutorials Dojo, whether it's right or wrong, he's going to tell you why this is right, give you some diagrams to justify it so you can digest it. And then he's going to tell you this is the correct answer and this is why. He's then going to tell you why the other answers are wrong. He's going to give you his sourcing for how it works. And if you keep missing questions about Transit Gateway, then you probably want to go take a skim on his cheat sheet to get a feel for what Transit Gateway is all about, right? So my point being is that, he's going to give you the rights, the wrongs, the sourcing, and then like if you're consistently missing, it has a video, he's going to have a cheat sheet. It's important that when you go do this, that you actually understand why the other answers are wrong, because your methodology for evaluating how to derive the right answer for this question is what these practice or study exams are going to correct. If you got this wrong, then you need to know, for example, why is this not the right answer? Well, probably because it doesn't have a centrally managed rule-based filtering solution. it's not centrally managed, right? This one's the only one that has a central managed option in it, right? So, and why? Because there's an existing transit gateway, so you can just do that, right? Attaching the firewall policy to a new network firewall on each account is not going to be a centrally managed thing. Now, the firewall manager would be a valid option, but notice they didn't offer the firewall manager really, right? Do I see the firewall manager in there? No. So the firewall manager is not an option because it's not in the list. The rest of this, as far as like creating an EC2 instance, Amazon, by the way, just as a general kind of rule of thumb, is never going to recommend that you use a unmanaged service over a managed service. They're never going to recommend that you roll your own versus using something that they provide. That's just a general rubric for them, right? So install an open source internet proxy software like an Answer B. Amazon's never going to recommend that. That is just not how they roll. They are trying to eat your operational costs, right? Not your raw costs, not your dollar costs. They want to eat your operational costs. So they're never going to recommend that. The other thing to note here is that by exclusion, even if you didn't necessarily know the answer the minute you read the question, by exclusion, you could pretty much eliminate these as options. But when you compare them to the other options available, they definitely don't make any sense. All right, let's do another one just to kind of give you a feel for the general strategy. All right, company wants to have a secure content management solution that can be accessed by its external customers via API calls. Good. External system API calls. The SA has been instructed to create the infrastructure design. The solution should enable users to upload documents as well as download a specific version or the latest version of a document. There's also a requirement to enable customer administrators to simply submit an API call that can roll back changes to an existing files that are sent to the system. Now, excuse me. I have to say that this is an interesting question because immediately my brain, even without looking at the answers, is thinking, well, this is probably going to be S3, right? Because we can do versioning and all that stuff. But I gotta say this is like something like Workdocs or Google Drive could work, but those are mainly web driven. I don't think those are API driven interfaces. So I don't think that like Workdocs is going to, for example, going to work. EFS is only available to operating systems. And so while you can make API calls to manage EFS, in my head, that wouldn't make sense. It really does seem like S3 is going to be the way to go here, right? So looking at this, it's like, we got two options, right? One is that we can set up S3 with versioning and server access logging enabled. That sounds right, because versioning would make sense here, right? Assuming that my thought process is correct and that these other two services aren't going to work, right? Set up an IAM role and access policy for each customer application. Okay, makes sense. Encrypt all documents using client-side encryption for enhanced data security. You could do that, right? Instead of using server-side. Share the encryption keys to all customers to unlock the documents. That seems a little off. Now I'm a little confused because it's like share the encryption keys with all customers to unlock the documents. I don't know about that, actually. So maybe that's not the right answer. Maybe that's like throwing me a little off, right? So my point being in doing that is I'm purposely injecting confusion in this whole thing, is that this is the kind of traps that they're going to lay for you, right? Because instantly, like I excluded EFS and I excluded Workdocs, but then, we were left with these two options, but now they throw in these keywords that like cast doubt about, do I really want to share the encryption keys with all the customers? So let's look at the other option. S3 with server logging, set up a role, use client-side encryption, then share the customer master key and client-side master key to all customers. Okay. Client-side master key to all customers. So both answers basically have you sharing the keys with all customers. Let me just check this out, right? There's a requirement for custom administrators. Maybe to submit an API call. Let's see. It doesn't seem like encryption is a key here. All right, let's go take a look maybe at the other options just to make sure.
So all the customers means who are trying to access this application, right? So
Right.
definitely they need to be shared with the, the encryption keys so that they can decrypt at their end, right? So probably yeah, because of versioning might be.
Right? So, and that's where I'm kind of headed, Banu, is that when you look at all this, all of a sudden, all the answers are kind of sketchy, like just like light reasoning, right? But to your point, the only one that seems to have the right, like to meet all the requirements, regardless of how we feel about the keys or think about the keys or whatnot, the only one that left that kind of meets this is actually S3 with versioning, right? So that seems like that would be the answer that we would take a shot at. But here's the catch, is that the problem is that WorkDocs is the right answer because, again, remember what I just said. If Amazon has a solution out of the box for you, they're going to want you to use that higher level service, right? And you can actually use WorkDocs for all of that stuff, right? It does do built-in encryption, version control, and access management. So the reason I threw all that in there is that because most of us are infrastructure people, we're going to tend to poo-poo a little bit the higher level services, and especially the ones that are kind of more client side facing. So bottom line is that Amazon's going to want you to prefer the higher level abstractions over the lower level abstractions. But remember, in my thought process, I immediately excluded that because I was like, no, S3's got to be the answer because that's what it's built for, right? Problem is that WorkDocs is literally built for that purpose, which is sharing documents. That's it. So just make sure that whatever biases you have as you work through these questions, you recognize that, like, for example, you might have a bias against like WorkDocs or what is that, Workspaces, where they have like VDI basically. You might have a bias against the service. Just be aware of those kind of things. This is why these are not just practice exams, they're also study exams. You can then go through, by the way, and take a look and figure out like why this doesn't work, right? So by the way, sharing the encryption keys to all customers is a huge security risk. So I was kind of right to be a little squirrely about that, right? And then same here, right? Security risk. But like EFS, for example, doesn't have the versioning features that we're looking for. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, here's what I want to do. So it's 10:03. So let's just take a quick 15-minute break because we've been going at this for an hour and a half. When you come back, it's going to be 10:19. What we're going to do is we're going to run through these exam questions and you're going to answer them. So you're going to post your answers in chat and we're going to start to build our muscle here and give you a feel for how to tear these questions apart. Okay. All good?
Any particular reason that you choose the fourth exam, the review mode? Just
No.
random.
No. Yeah, I think it's just because I clicked on it before. The other ones I might have been in and out of, and so certain questions might have been answered. I knew the fourth exam was totally fresh because I had used it before. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no hierarchy there. All right, so come back at 10:19, take a quick break, and we'll see you in just a bit. All right, everyone. Welcome back. Let's see. So any questions about the basically exam itself, the exam study guide, the supplemental labs, including the well-architected framework labs and the AWS workshops or workshops.aws, or about the practice exams? Just to ask this, what did I say was the percentage that you needed to get on one of the review mode sets before you moved on to the other review mode set in order to be ready for the exam?
90.
90? Did everyone say 90? I heard some overlap there. You might say, Michael, why is it 90? We just need a 750 to pass. You know why. First of all, these questions are not going to be exact, and they shouldn't be. This isn't an exam dump, right? Second of all, you're going to be nervous. So, you're going to lose 10 points, give or take, right? And so we're shooting for an 800 plus. And, just to qualify this is that, I've been doing cloud AWS almost exclusively as a consultant, working for various companies, large company, Honeywell, that kind of thing, for, over 11 years now. And that knowledge doesn't mean that you're ready to pass the certification. It does help. Don't get me wrong. I know things about AWS, and then when they answer these questions, I'm like, yeah, I know that. I don't even know that I studied that. I just know it from doing it, right? But just know that that knowledge doesn't necessarily guarantee you're going to pass the certification, because it does test the ins and outs, whereas your experience is probably more about applicability, right? This is going to test all the little like seedy little corners of AWS knowledge. Okay. Okay. Well, the floor is open. Ask any questions at any time. Otherwise, we're going to go through and do, basically spend some time running through all these questions for like about the next 90 minutes or so. Okay.
So you suggest doing all the review mode exams, or a couple of them should be?
So in our experience, you really only need 2 at 90% to pass the exam. If you're feeling super unconfident, do a 3rd. If you've never touched AWS infrastructure, then I would definitely do all of them, right? Just because it makes up the gaps, if you will. But generally, you only need to do 2. And some of the exams, for example, if it's DevOps engineering, there's only 2 practice mode sets. There's only 2 review mode sets anyway. But this one happens to have 4. Okay.
Yeah, when I took the first exam in the review mode, I just got around 60% the first time. So but it was very useful the way they were giving the options, the details about why something is incorrect. It was very useful.
Good. Good. I actually, just so you all know, and I'm like looking around, like, what did I do with this thing? I usually have a notebook, and sometimes I'll do it in OneNote. I'm a Linux guy, but I gotta tell you, I have this secret love affair with Microsoft's OneNote. I just, there's no like better tool for that kind of thing. It allows you like to mind map stuff. I gotta tell you, I am a big believer in doodling, structuring those things out, playing with the information, because it really will set it in your mind. So just know that when you run through these questions, feel free to grab a notebook and just like, oh, now they're talking about code deploy. I have a page on code deploy, and you can flip to the code services and then add whatever little distinction that you grab. For example, I'm assuming that most of you didn't know that WorkDocs did actually have versioning and does have built-in client encryption, right? So then maybe there's an end user services that has like workspaces and WorkDocs, and there's another workmail, maybe. And you might go onto that page and just say, hey, here's WorkDocs. Learned that it has client-side encryption. Even if you never look at it again, your retention is going to increase 30 to 40% by most studies, right? So feel free to play with this information. Don't just run through the practice exams just for the sake of memorizing the stuff. Get the distinctions that allow you to shift your thinking, because like I said, these questions aren't going to match. And so your ability to analyze what they're asking for and how that reconciles with the answers, and how that reconciles with what you know about the services, those 3 things have to come together. Your analysis of the question, your analysis of the answers, and your understanding and knowledge around the services in question. Let's put that in practice. Okay. This is migration planning. By the way, the exam is not going to tell you which flavor of question you have. Wouldn't that you be so lucky if that was the case? It's not going to tell you it's a migration question. Okay. We got a multi-tiered web app. It's using compute optimized instances for server-side processing and storage optimized EC2 instances to store media files. To ensure data durability, there's a scheduled job that replicates the files to each EC2 instance. The current architecture worked for a few months. We started. Yes.
Sorry, are you sharing your screen? I mean, at least I can't see.
Only in my fantasy world. So thank you for saying something. Now my screen should be shared.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying something. Yeah. Okay. So let's start over. Multi-tier web app. We're using compute optimized instances, and we're using storage optimized instances. To ensure data durability, we have a scheduled job that's replicating files to each of the EC2 instances. The current architecture worked for a while, but it started to fail as the number of files grew, which is why they decided to redesign the system, right? So which of the following options should the SA implement in order to launch a new architecture with improved data durability and cost efficiency? So remember, you not only want to fix it, but it's got to be more durable and more cost effective. So A, B, C, or D? Okay. So I see a couple of votes for D. Let's see. Okay. Now, before we even look at why that's the right answer and whatnot, somebody tell me, so Barathi, I'm picking you first for just a second, okay? Tell me, first of all, why is that first sentence okay versus like any of the other first sentences?
So S3 static content in S3 bucket.
Wait, is that Barathi?
Right. Pardon me? This is Bhanu. Yeah.
Oh, Banu, hold on just one second. Barathi?
Yeah, definitely. I think, the first thing is the S3 will be the most cost effective. So the EFS is gone for that. I crossed out B for that. And the second reason is it's also looking for a durable solution and looking for more performance. So I think, the CloudFront is much more good when you think about distribution of static data.
Perfect. Okay, good. And you made a couple of really key points there that I think are super valid. One, you said that S3 has a higher managed service, is more cost effective, right? You said that CloudFront would reduce latency, so it would also basically more performant, which wasn't a requirement, but it doesn't like make it worse from a performance standpoint. It actually makes it better. So you don't have to worry about making the solution even worse than what it was before. In addition, obviously it's highly durable because it's got what? How many nines of durability does S3 have? Anybody?
9 nines.
It's got 11 nines.
11 nines.
So it takes them like 100,000 years or something to lose like one of your 10,000. It's something ridiculous. It's crazy, right? Now, you also made a good point, Barathi, and you said that this is good for static content. And notice that this says server-side processing. So you've already kind of teed us up for the next statement, which is that we know we actually need to have some kind of dynamic processor server side, right? So we know that we need EC2 instances because S3 is going to handle the static files and the media files totally fine, but you've already teed us up for the next thing, which is that we need to take care of the storage optimized instances, which S3 does. Then how do we take care of the compute optimized instances, which are doing server side processing? We could use API gateway for that if we knew exactly what was being called, but that's not an option here. Instead, we're going to use EC2 instances to fill in the gaps for the server side calls. So you've already kind of taken care of those two kind of previous components, right? Now, Banu, do me a favor. So using combination of Cost Explorer and Trusted Advisor, like what are those tools going to get us? Like let's ignore Cost Explorer because that's pretty intuitive, right? Explore cost, you can actually see that. What is Trusted Advisor going to get us? Why is that important here? Banu, sorry, I was talking to you.
Yeah.
What does Trusted Advisor do? And the answer might be that you don't know, right? Because
Yeah.
I ran into that
Yeah.
with AWS forecasting last week, right? I was like, I don't even touch forecasting. I don't even know what that is, right? Because there's like 400 services, so how can we know everything? So Trusted Advisor, by the way, oddly enough, mimics the kind of 5 pillars of the well-architected framework. One of them is, instead of calling it reliability, it's called fault tolerance. And one of them is service quotas. So there's one of them missing there. But Trusted Advisor watches your account. And if you have a business or an enterprise support plan, what it does is it sends recommendations. It says, hey, by the way, you've got 5 instances that are like 5% utilized. Is this what you want? You've got security group holes open inside of your firewalls and open to the public. Is this what you want? So Cost Explorer is going to govern costs, but one of the pillars inside of Trusted Advisor is cost optimization. So Trusted Advisor will also make recommendations about cost as well. So in addition to covering the data durability with all of the S3 stuff and obviously including the EC2 instances because we have server-side calls, the cost-effective stuff is one that we're using a high-level service like S3, which is super efficient for website hosting compared to an EC2 instance. And we're using Cost Explorer and Trusted Advisor to also help us manage operating costs and identify potential savings. The other answers, like Beanstalk is just a wizard for EC2. That's not the cheapest way to go to this. EFS set up with EC2 instances, and that's actually still also a workable solution, but it's not the most cost effective. And then host the entire web application on S3 isn't going to work because there's server-side calls. Cross-region replication is also unnecessary with 11 nines of durability. If they needed DR level data durability, sure, that would make sense. The third answer with consolidated billing and Trusted Advisor, consolidated billing is not necessarily going to give you cost efficiency unless you're using multiple accounts. So for that reason, the fourth answer just makes a lot of sense. So good job, but just want to make sure that we're clear about our reasoning. Okay. So these are the kind of questions I'm going to ask you because I want you to elucidate and reveal your reasoning, because that's the thing you're going to correct with these study guides is where your thinking might be wrong. I got to tell you, for the DevOps engineering exam, and I can't remember the service, I could not answer this question right, no matter how many times I saw it. I must have seen it 15 times, and I couldn't answer the question right because I couldn't change the way I thought about the service. And so I just kind of like left that service alone because I was getting 95s and 96s on the practice exam, but I kept missing this one question about the service because I stubbornly just refused to change my mind about how I thought about it. So just watch out for those biases, okay? And then this talks about it, right? Server-side processing, consolidated billing if you have organizations. Yeah. So pretty much everything we talked about. Okay. I'm going to talk about this one, and then I'm going to give you 3 minutes from now to answer it, right? Company runs hundreds of EC2 instances inside of VPC. When an EC2 error is encountered, the SA must perform manual steps in order to regain access. Management wants to automatically recover impaired EC2 instances in the VPC. The goal is to automatically fix an instance that is unreachable due to either like network configurations, RDP issues, firewall settings, security settings, or many others to meet compliance requirements. So take a look. I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Which of the options below could solve that problem? All right, keep going. I'll be right back. I'm on headset, by the way. I just need to step away from video for a second. Okay, you got one more minute, give or take. Okay. I got 2 votes for A. I get a vote for C. Okay. Let me ask you this before I choose any answer, right? Is that what, by the way, is always implied by these questions by Amazon? Can anyone just put this into words for me, either verbally or in chat? What is always implied by Amazon, even if it's not a stated requirement? What is something they always want from you?
To use one of their services.
Yes, Greg, first of all, yes, that's it. And so just understand that, like, if the option says like, hey, use Code Pipeline, and then the next one says use Jenkins, and they're the exact same answer, to Craig's point, they're going to want you to say Code Pipeline because that's an AWS service. Jenkins is not. Don't get me wrong. If Jenkins is the best answer and there's no other competing best answer, you could use Jenkins, but they are not going to recommend a third party as a general rule of thumb. So Craig's right on with that, right? The other thing is that notice that it's always implied that you use the most suitable solution. That literally says that in the question. I'm going to just say this. What does suitable mean? Well, to Amazon, suitable means what is going to provide the least complexity and the least operational overhead to the user. That's what suitable always means to them. Suitable always means cheapest, most performant, most cost effective, right? They're going to run the pillars at you. So when they say suitable, they want you to embrace this against the well-architected framework, which means operational excellence, which favors simplicity, performance, costing, reliability, security, and of course now sustainability. Okay. So just never forget that, is that when they just give you this one, they say, oh, just make it suitable. It's a trap. They want you to make this an adherent to the 5 pillars of the architecture framework. So by that token, by the way, which of these is the most complex solution? Which of these by far is the heaviest solution out here? And I saw your answers, so you don't have to change your answers, just kind of curious.
A.
A by far looks like it would work, by the way, but is by far the most complex answer. What's the second most complex answer? Which one of these uses more than one service?
D.
D. Okay, good. So I want you to be thinking this way because you don't have to do deep analysis on this. Just by the number of sentences, you can tell that the first one's more complex and the last one's more complex, right? But you might have looked at B and C and said, well, I don't even know if OpsWorks, Chef Automate, or Systems Manager even do that, right? Now, I'm going to stick with the original answer. So there were more votes for A, right? So I'm just going to check it, right? And the answer is actually C. And here's the reason why. First of all, Chef Automate is not going to execute documents. Just so we're clear, answer B, Chef uses what? What does Chef use in order to execute its command structures? Like Ansible uses playbooks, Puppet uses manifest. What does Chef use?
Recipes or cookbooks?
Exactly, Craig. Recipes or cookbooks, right? I was a chef engineer for like 10 years. Love Ansible now, preferably not going back to that world. Okay, so Chef uses cookbooks or recipes. So, that's first of all, the answer is just wrong out of the box. Let's look at the first one though. Combination of config, systems manager, sessions manager to self-diagnose and troubleshoot problems on your C2 Linux. So first of all, you can't use session manager that way. You can't automate through session manager. So automatically that answer is off the table because session manager will not allow you to remote automate. If you want to automate using systems manager, you have to use systems manager automation, which will then require the agent to be on the box, and it's going to execute whatever script or document you give it using the automation manager against the agent that's on the box. So session manager isn't used for that function. So I don't even have to read the rest of this because session manager can't be used for that. So that's out of the gate wrong. Chef Automate, we already excluded because it refers to a document and it needs to be a cookbook that you have custom written. And then looking at the fourth one, it says use a combination of systems manager, state manager, and config to self-diagnose and troubleshoot problems. Automate the recovery process by using the systems manager maintenance windows. None of those services in system manager do that function. It's pretty close, actually. If they said automate this recovery process by saying systems manager automation, that actually, you could actually do that. State manager, by the way, will manage the state. Should these systems be up? Should they be down? Like it will do that. But that's wrong. The last sentence is wrong. So really then that leaves the third one, which is not only the simplest operationally, but it's also the most technically correct. You're going to use systems manager automation and you're going to run the execute EC2 rescue document. Now, just to be forewarned, systems manager has 17 subservices at my last count underneath it, and I haven't seen it in a month. So if you don't know what patch manager is, you don't know what state manager is, you don't know what automation is, you don't know what documents are, you don't know what compliance or the ops center, or you don't know what those are, I don't need you to be able to use them, but I need you to know what those subservices do underneath systems manager. Okay, at the pro level exam, you don't have to know what everything does. Sorry, you don't have to know how to use everything, but you do have to know what everything does from a core perspective, right? Core services, not satellites and not Sumerian, which does augmented reality. You don't need to know what those do. You just need to know what the core services do, okay? CloudWatch, by the way, has the same problem. CloudWatch has 11 subservices underneath CloudWatch. You need to know which each of those can do. You don't need to know how to use them per se, okay? Is there anybody who's unclear about why C is the right answer, or you have any questions there? That document, by the way, will automatically go in and correct any broken security groups, firewalls. Sorry, security groups are firewalls. Security groups, NACLs. It'll automatically fix things. If you want to see it, by the way, you can log into your free account, go into Systems Manager Automation, look for this document, and you can actually see what it does. It's pretty cool, actually. I don't think there's anything else here to tell you. Okay. All right, this one I'm going to give you a straight 3 minutes. You're going to read it. It is technically 10:45. So I want you to read it just for straight up for 3 minutes. That's a little bit more time, by the way, you're going to get. And then when you're ready, post your 2 answers. Don't forget this, by the way. People miss questions by not seeing what the asks are. So make sure you know you got to select 2 here. All right, let's see. Is that readable? Yeah, it's readable. Cool. All right, I'll leave you to it. Okay. Pretty close. Last minute. Okay. We're there. Okay. So I see that a lot of people put C and E. Good. Okay. So Craig, do me a favor and tell me what the requirements are from the question, just in like single words. What are the ilities or non-functional requirements they're trying to satisfy here?
Scalability,
Gotcha.
maintainability, reducing the maintenance,
Yep.
security, so another one of the tenants, and then performance related.
Good. Good. So literally they're just walking down the well-architected framework, right? They went security first, then they did reliability, right? Then they did performance efficiency, and then they did basically operational excellence. They didn't do cost optimization, but maintenance overhead is operational excellence, right? So they literally just walked down 4 pillars of the well-architected framework. So you hit it right on the head. Okay. So all of you answered C and E, so you seem really sure about this question, right? So let me ask you this, and Craig, I'm going to stay with you for a second. Why would you choose Aurora with MySQL with multi-AZ enabled over, say, B and D? Why would you choose those over the others? What was the distinction there?
Well, so B sounds like you're running the MySQL cluster on EC2 instances in your VPC.
Right.
So, using a non-Amazon service is not the way to go in these questions. And then it seems like they're pushing their own Aurora with the multi-AZ, distribution for reliability over just using RDS. So that's why I went with the distinction between the database options.
Okay. Let me add just one clarification, because that's all perfectly accurate. It is more operational overhead to run your own databases on a virtual machine. RDS, you don't even log into the virtual machines. Amazon handles all that abstraction for you. So there is more operational overhead to running it on EC2 instances. And RDS MySQL does require more operational maintenance than Aurora from MySQL in terms of the same performance standpoint. So this is where the distinction is. Aurora is a little less maintenance overhead, but what it really gets you is that if you're using MySQL, Aurora is like 3 times faster with the exact same data set, same schema, right? So your performance is better. Plus multi-read, like multi-AZ enabled with MySQL is about the same as having multi-AZ enabled with RDS, but notice they didn't say multi-AZ with RDS, right? They said read replicas. So there's 2 reasons why you would use Aurora. One, faster, more cost-effective, less operational overhead, better reliability and availability, because they didn't say multi-AZ with MySQL. They just said read instances. So I just want to make sure that's clear. It's not just that Amazon prefers you to use those services. That's actually an accurate statement, Craig, totally on the mark. It is actually less operational overhead to actually use the higher level services. Now, is it more expensive? Probably, but we don't really quantify operational soft costs, so we don't really know what the difference is. So, okay.
So
The rest
that was my question. If they mentioned about a least cost solution, will we still go with Aurora in this
Yes.
case?
Yeah, you would. The difference between RDS MySQL and Aurora MySQL is minuscule. It's the performance cost efficiency you're going to get with Aurora is so much better than it is with RDS MySQL that's not going to be a distinguishing factor is the cost difference. Now the cost difference between RDS and EC2 running your own database, there's a huge cost difference there. Way more expensive for you to run your own EC2 instances. The rest of these distinctions about using S3 buckets to store static content, we already talked about that in the previous question, so you already got that. Reducing latency using CloudFront, Bharathi explained that really clearly in the previous one, so we're clear on that. The only thing that was an addition is the using WAF rules to block common web exploits. I'm assuming you all know what a WAF is. It's basically a layer 7 firewall, right? That's built for web applications. So if you don't know what a WAF is, you definitely want to double down on studying that. By the way, let's check it because maybe we're just all making it up. We're just assuming that's the right answer. What if other things are the right answer? No, obviously it's right. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about how we derived at these answers? Anything that we need to peel back? Anything where you're like, Michael, I actually thought this and you're saying this? Please feel free to challenge anything I say at any point in time or any thought process I reveal to you.
I just wanted to add one thing, Michael. So I know Banu brought up a point, like, what if they were asking for the most cost-effective solution? Even if it were the most cost-effective solution, I mean, one is the price difference. You would not get that reliability with RDS. I think it's a combination of all the requirements that goes together. We just can't go cost alone as a single attribute. It has to be like a complete combination of every single thing, including cost. That's what I feel.
Yeah. No, that's true, Bharathi. I agree with that completely. I think Banu was asking, like, theoretically, if it was a different question where they emphasize cost effectiveness, would the slightly more expensive Aurora cause a conflict with RDS? But you are absolutely correct. You have to take all of these into consideration. If you miss one, you failed the question, right? So that's accurate. Yeah, this time they didn't ask us about cost. But look at that long explanation. Good. Okay, same deal. It is, I'm just looking at the time. So it's like almost at the top of 10:55. So take 3 minutes, read through this. Let's post our answers. This time, one of you is going to explain what you think the reasoning is. All right, last 30 seconds. Okay. Answers thus far? I got one answer. Anybody else? I really need 3 in order to make a vote here. Okay, so I got B, C, and D, right? So I got one of each. So it sounds like there's some confusion here. Okay, so I'm not gonna have one of you answer it because there's not a whole lot of consensus. So hold us 1 second, right? All right, so a media company's got a web service that allows users to upload and share videos. Currently, the web servers are hosted on an auto-scaling group of EC2 instances. So that's one storage level or processing level, sorry. And the videos are stored on the EBS volumes on the web servers. So that's one piece of the architecture. Each uploaded video is going to send a message to SQS, which is then processed by another group of EC2 instances. Now, how they get access to the volumes when they're on another system's EBS volumes, that's an interesting question in and of itself. So we've got front-end web servers, we got an SQS queue, and we've got back-end processors that are processing the videos. Those back-end processors are running on a third-party service to analyze and categorize the videos. The website also contains static content that has variable user traffic. And so the company is looking for a couple of things. They want to reduce costs, they want to get rid of the third-party software, and they want to reduce their management overhead. Done. Costs, get rid of the third party, reduce management overhead. So ignore the question for a second. Out of these 4 levels of basically hosting an action, virtual machines, containers, serverless, and managed services, which of those basically has the lowest management overhead? Virtual machines, containers, serverless like Lambda, or purely managed services? Which of those has the lowest overhead? So out of those, managed services have the lowest management overhead. Lambda has the next lowest. Containers has the next lowest, and virtual machines have the most management overhead out of the 4 ways for us to actually host and execute an application. Okay. So when you look at these, automatically, any of the answers that have EC2 in there, that's going to be the most management overhead. And to be frank about it, ECS and EKS, which are the container services, if they're in EC2 mode, they are also just slightly less management overhead, but still managed overhead. You're still running virtual machines at that point in time. Even if they're managed, you're still running virtual machines. To your point, though, is that it says ECS Fargate, which is the serverless version of containers. So that means you don't have to manage servers with when you run ECS or EKS in Fargate mode. Okay. But comparing that to just running it straight out of S3, which is a highly managed service, containers are actually going to be more expensive, right? Because remember, virtual machines, containers, serverless, managed service in terms of operational overhead. So S3 as a managed service is going to cost you far less to manage than either virtual machines or containers. Anyone not following me? Anyone think that's a dumb thing that I just said? You want to challenge it? I don't mean that like I want to pick a fight with you. I respectfully want you to disagree with me, right? If you think that's dumb, right? Okay. So out of these options, because I think what we all got concerned about, maybe you did this as well, is that I was concerned that there's dynamic content in here, which S3 isn't going to cover, right? But all I've heard thus far is that there's static content and they're uploading video files. That's all I heard thus far. There's no backends. There's no database here. You know, like, so using S3, right? And then storing the videos on a separate S3 bucket, configuring event notification, all of this is technically accurate. All of this is also technically accurate. This is also technically accurate. Is that, wait, hold on. Is that technically accurate? Yeah, that's technically accurate. And then this is also technically accurate, but here's the problem. EC2 instances, Fargate. So if I'm going to go for reducing management overhead the most, reducing costs the most, because by the way, it looks like all of these get rid of the third-party software. So none of these are a bad option, right? I'm going to guess that it's probably going to be C. Now I could be completely and utterly wrong, which in this case, you were right. Let's find out why, right? Why? All right, so let's go take a look at it. So let's go find out exactly why this particular one doesn't work. Aha, it's because of the thing that I mentioned, right? There's no mention regarding the nature of the application, but we can assume that it's dynamic because it allows users to log in and upload videos. We can't safely host this on S3. So that would be, right? I called that out, is that I'm kind of like worried that it's dynamic, but instead of allowing that to be a valid concern, I was like, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and go with S3. Flaw in my thinking, right? So in this particular case, the safest bet that actually meets these particular needs is actually going to be, right? You're going to use ECS, the Fargate, the serverless version, because that gives us as far up to the serverless chain as we possibly can. The point to that, by the way, is when you have a little random thought like that, where you're like, well, I'm kind of concerned about, you know, can DynamoDB handle like transactions, which it kind of can, but it's not as good as a database. You know, is RDS, you know, is that going to do high availability? You know, are these web servers dynamic? And I apologize for this, because if I had control over these exams, there would be no word fudging in this whole thing. But this is the kind of thing they do, is that they throw in these little subtleties in there, and you have to basically like assume like, well, they don't make any mention about, you know, database consistency, or they don't make any mention about website performance. The other thing, by the way, that will throw this off a little bit is that this variable user traffic is also kind of a yellow/red flag. S3 can host static content en masse at a pretty high rate, but when they throw in things like variable user traffic, that kind of is a little bit of a yellow flag of like, well, how much performance are you actually going to need? Because S3 will only get you so far. I think it's like 300 reads a second or something like that for a single file. Even if you do optimizations, I think you can get up to 3,000, but that's still not awesome, right? So again, just make sure that if you have some little kind of niggling kind of like doubt like that, make sure you know what that's about, because it could be actually super valid. And in this case, if we're all thinking about, well, what if it's dynamic content? That's a valid distinction, okay? So remember that if you think about using S3 as an answer, make sure that it is primarily static content or something's handling the dynamic piece. We saw that in a previous question as well, is that we had to throw in EC2 in order to get that to work, right? So, good. Any questions about that? Okay. Cool, let's keep going. By the way, hopefully you find this useful, us peeling back the thought processes, and hopefully you're taking notes about the things that you didn't know or right need to know more of. Okay, so it is 11:06:40, so let's just say it's 11:07. So this time I'm going to give you 2.5 minutes, which is actually kind of more like the question time. Okay, we're almost there. Okay. See, Bono, you were saying not sure about it though. Okay. So it looks like there's 2 votes for A and there's 2 votes for C. Is that right? Yeah. Actually, now there's 3 votes for C and 3 votes for
I
A.
fixed my answer. I put AD accidental.
Ah, okay. Yeah, yeah, I see that. Okay, let's stop for a second before we check this out. Okay. So first of all, let's look at these answers one at a time. So first of all, someone tell me what the requirements are, right? What is it that we're trying to accomplish, right? What are the 2 things from which 2 pillars, right? Well, which one pillar? What's the main goal?
Cost
Yeah.
optimization.
Cost optimization. So whether that's in decreasing cost or increasing revenue, it's about money, right? Now, the first one, set up a scheduled job to drop the DynamoDB table from the previous day after it's successfully stored in S3, and then create another DynamoDB table for the day and perform the deletion and creation process every day. Oddly enough, that's actually a pretty common usage pattern. Plus, it would drop the old table data and allow you to start a new, so you wouldn't be hosting the previous day's table, because S3 is cheaper than DynamoDB, has a general rule of thumb. No question there. Yeah, because I mean, the S3 is built for cheap storage, right? So that sounds like that could work. Use Elasticache to cache reads and writes from the Dynamo table. Which of the 5 pillars is using Elasticache to do this? What is that going to improve? Is that going to improve reliability, performance, cost? Give me an idea.
Performance.
Performance. That wasn't our goal though, right, Bharathi? Our goal was to basically improve costs. So adding Elasticache is going to increase costs. So I'm not sure about B. I don't know what avail a reserved capacity is for provision throughput. I think what they're saying is that we're going to reserve some capacity for provision throughput for DynamoDB. By the way, compared to on demand, are reservations cheaper or is on demand cheaper?
Reserved capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, let's be clear. It's true for EC2. It's true for every other service. It's true for CloudFront. You know, by the way, there's a bunch of things that can have reservations. A lot. Elasticache, for example, could have reservations. Most people don't know that. If you read the pricing paper, you'll see a bunch in there, by the way. So C looks like a valid answer, which of course, a lot of you picked A and C, so that makes sense. Now, launching a Redshift cluster to replace DynamoDB, first of all, is that going to improve or worsen any of the pillars of the well-architected framework?
Actually, you will be losing the reliability because you're moving from an S3 to one zone S3.
So you're going to lose some durability. So you might make the solution a little worse. That's correct. What else is going to be made worse by launching a Redshift cluster?
I mean, it's more expensive.
Wait, say that again, Craig or Banu?
I mean, I think it's going to be more expensive than DynamoDB.
Oh yeah, definitely. Plus, just to say this, it's great for OLAP though, so it's not necessarily a bad choice, right? But it's going to make the cost pillar worse. Using an RDS instance with multi-AZ deployments, which 2 pillars is that going to make worse?
Definitely cost would go up.
Yep. And then what other pillar will be made worse if you decide to do that?
Operational excellence.
Exactly. DynamoDB is a SaaS, so it's a serverless solution. RDS is technically a PaaS because you still have to run EC2 instances, even though you don't manage them. So it's not infrastructure as a service, but you're still running a platform. It is more operational overhead. You have to patch that database. You got a point in time backup and all that stuff. DynamoDB will do that for you. Okay, so let's check and see, because maybe I'm just making it up, right? Okay, cool. Makes sense, right? So does that make sense though? Is that our primary focus was just a lower costs. The other options all increase costs in some form or fashion. Or they just in general made the solution worse, which is not what we want. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. All right, one more. Well, we got a few more actually that we can do. All right, so it's 14, 11, 14, 30. So I'm actually just going to give you 2.5 minutes on this one. So literally we're going to come back at 11, 17. So go for it. Okay, we're at time. All right, so I see DCNA, right? So as far as like, is it only the dev account? Is it both the UAT and dev accounts, or none of the accounts, right? So I'm just gonna go with the first answer just to kind of like highlight it. But here's the catch, okay? So let's draw the distinctions so that we can make sure we're very clear about how standard reservations function. And how do you know these are standard reservations? Because it doesn't say anything else. It doesn't say scheduled reservations. It doesn't say convertible reservations. It just says reservations, which are just standard reservations. Let's draw some distinctions here, right? Just to make sure. One, we've got the prod account purchased them in US West 2A. It's not running anything though. But the dev account has basically the same size running also in 2A, but the UAT account has them in US in West 1, which that's just crazy. So let me just remove that for a second because that's not helpful, right? So we got this here, and then we've got this here, right? And then we've got this here. Now, when you turn on consolidated billing, if you buy reservations in any account, they're going to show up for the rest of the accounts. That's why you turn on consolidated billing, is so you can share, you know, reservations, but also economies of scale, right? Because if each account's using, you know, 5 terabytes of S3, you're not going to get a volume discount until you cross 10 terabytes. But if you aggregate them all together and they're all using 5 terabytes, then you got 15 terabytes. So your additional 5 terabytes is at a different lower price, right? So standard reservations require you to reserve the operating system, right? The availability zone, the size of system, the t-shirt size, and the class, the family type, right? So standard reservations are the most rigid of the reservations. You have to specify all this stuff, including where it's running at, down to the availability zone, right? Because that's how reservations function. And scheduled reservations work the same way. Convertible allow you to change a few things in terms of sizes and potentially family. I don't remember off the top of my head if convertible even lets you change the I don't think it lets you change the location, but I could be wrong about that. Right? So just to be clear about this is why then the answer has to be A, because the dev account is the only one that's in the same availability zone as the prod account. The UAT account is in a different, it's even a different region, right? So that, some ways that makes it even worse, right? Because US West 1 is what? California, and US West 2 is Oregon. So remember, one, consolidated billing allows you to share your eyes with anybody. And by the way, if you're running an organization or whatever, you can actually turn that off if you want to. Two, standard reservations require you to choose the reservation down to the availability zone. If you don't match that availability zone, then your system is not going to match, and it has to match in size and all that stuff as well. Okay.
One
Go ahead.
question on this, right? But usually on the dev accounts, we don't use a reserved instances because you don't want to run your dev account, because reserved instances go like at least for a year, you need to keep it running, and you don't need usually that kind of scenario on the development.
Well, and the only thing, Bharathi, I agree with you completely, by the way. You can save a tremendous amount of money by just shutting the environment off at night and, shutting it off on the weekends. The only thing that doesn't work for is a lot of companies now are doing a follow the sun model when it comes to their development teams, and they're typically accessing the same environments, even though, that may not be latency appropriate. So they'll keep the environments up running 24/7. But you're right. In general, you would shut them down. Like if no one's using them, then just shut them off. In that case, by the way, you could use scheduled reserved instances instead of standard reserved instances. So you could still actually use reservations and get up to a 40-something% discount, but you wouldn't use standard reserved instances. Does that make sense? So scheduled RIs is what you would look at if you were doing that. If you were
Yeah,
showing them.
probably right. I think I definitely misread the lines here. So I was just thinking, when we talk about reserved instances, maybe that should not have been the first choice for a development. So that's the reason I chose none. But since they already have it, probably that's where we have to choose what would be the best option.
Yeah. Well, good. So it's good to be aware of that, because like you saw me earlier, automatically exclude workspaces because I have a little bit of bias against that, right? So it's good to be aware of where you've immediately dismissed a solution, right? Because we all have those little picadillos around, I don't know what you call them, discriminations, prejudices, whatever, right? So it's good to be aware of that. Now, when you encounter it, you'll be like, oh, maybe that is an option. Okay. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Someone asked me the number one thing. No, not asked me. Sorry. Someone was asking, Thich Nhat Hanh, who's like a famous Vietnamese kind of Buddhist monk. They were asking him, like, what is the number one thing that makes you like a good problem solver? Because I guess he's apparently known for being able to really get to the heart of things. And he died recently, actually, which is why I was kind of like looking into his life a little bit. But I've always been a fan. And he said the number one thing that actually helped him become a good problem solver was meditation, which I thought was a great answer. So just know, if you're not meditating and you're working in this crazy corporate world, mindfulness practices or meditation practices can be great for your problem solving skills. Just throw that out there. Okay, let's see. We're gonna keep going. So it's 11:23, almost 30 right now. So I'm gonna give you another 2.5. So we're gonna come back at 25, 26, 27, right at 11:27. Okay, 1 minute left, just so you know. Okay, here we are. All right, so first of all, we know this is a migration question, even if we didn't say it in the upper left-hand side, because, well, we're migrating, right? So to save costs and to get the benefits of cloud computing, the company wants to move all of their virtual machines to AWS, which are all currently located in VMware. So the SA is going to require to generate new AMIs of all the virtual machines, which can be launched as an EC2 instance inside of the company's VPC, right? So straight up. So which combination of steps should the SA do to properly execute the cloud migration? Meaning, is it going to follow like traditional pillars? What's the least operational overhead? What's the most cost effective? What still meets requirements and capabilities, right? Now, let me ask you this. Are we migrating virtual machines, containers, or serverless applications? Which, by the way, it could be a serverless like piece of software on the on-premise. So what are we migrating? Virtual machines, containers, or serverless functions?
VMs.
Yeah, we're definitely doing VMs, right? So first of all, let me just ask you this then. If we know that we're doing virtual machines, then immediately, by the way, we know that we need to have something that's either is gonna generate AMIs, because that's literally the requirement, is that we need to generate new AMIs. Let me ask you this. Does the SAM, look at E, does the SAM model apply to virtual machines, or does it only apply to serverless?
It's only serverless, right?
Yeah, it's only serverless. I mean, it's the serverless application model. So we know that this one,
SMS is for virtual machines.
SMS, right, is for virtual machines, right? So it kind of makes sense that that would definitely be one of them. Now, you might say, but Michael, I don't even know if this is a real thing, right? Agreed. Honestly, I'm looking at that going, is the server migration connector, is that a real thing? I don't remember installing that when I did when I've done migrations, but maybe I did and they called it something else. So let's go through elimination, because let's say you don't think this is it because you've never heard of that before and you're like, I don't even really know what that is. First of all, using Service Catalog to do this and migrate virtual machines, that's not what Service Catalog is for. So that answer is out. It can't be C. Service Catalog is used as a like portfolio website for you to vend, like a vending machine, so you can vend out stuff to your users. You wouldn't use Service Catalog for that. Code Pipeline can build AMIs, but only if you call the EC2 image builder, which it makes no reference to that. And Pipeline cannot do any kind of on-premise migration. So at that point in time, I would have just eliminated the last three answers, and I probably would just go for this. But my thinking could be completely flawed, right? Maybe we should be using something else. But in this particular case, the server migration connector is actually a part of SMS. So even through process of elimination, we could figure out that the other things just really aren't going to work, actually. They're not even going to clearly do what we're needing them to do. So SAM is used to build serverless applications. Code Pipeline is not useful for migrating, right, virtual machines. And the catalog is allow you to make a catalog of services. It's not used for migration. So hopefully that's clear. You want the server migration service, and you're going to need to install the server migration connector, which actually I believe installs in vCenter, if I remember correctly, and would allow you basically to migrate those virtual machines over. Questions about any of that? So even if you don't know the answer, please exclude the other answers.
One generic question about this direct connect. So many times I've seen that in the questions they talk about the cost, and the answer, is like a direct connect. I was selecting VPN, but end of the day, it was going to direct connect. So it takes 30 days and it involves some extra cost compared to the VPN tunnels, right? So I always have this doubt why the cost wise direct connect will still make it.
So even though Direct Connect is going to cost you a monthly fee for the actual either 1, 10, or 100 gigabit connection that you have out to AWS, your data transfer charges are way cheaper with Direct Connect. So while that initial fee will probably be eclipsed, if you're running, terabits of data over your VPN connection versus your direct connection, first of all, I can't remember what VPN is capped at, but it's much slower than Direct Connect. In addition, you're going to get charged for all the data that you pull out of AWS using VPN. Whereas if you pull it out with the Direct Connect, it's going to be much cheaper. So is it cheaper than the monthly cost? Depends on the data, but in general, Direct Connect data charges are going to be cheaper.
So in that case, I mean, for redundancy, right? Should we go with the 2 direct connections or 1 direct connection with like a VPN tunnel?
It depends on what your business requirements are. In general, most of the companies I use at an enterprise level will run 2 direct connect connections. Because instead of buying like one, for example, like 10 megabit connection, because maybe they only need like 2 gigabits, they'll just buy 2 like separate tunnels. And then small and medium sized companies, they'll buy a direct connect connection and they'll fall back to VPN. So general rule of thumb is it just depends on what the company can afford to get away with and what their business requirements are. Like most enterprise companies are like, we can't deal with any outage. So they'll run direct connect connections to do 2 different partners for AWS and then have that come into the VPC or the transit gateway in this case. So I would say if it's an enterprise, it's usually 2 direct connects. If it's less than an enterprise, it's going to be a direct connect and a VPN fallback. By the way, I stand corrected. So let's correct this phrase that Michael said. The server migration connector is a free BSD VM that installs into your environment. So correct that. It's not an agent. That's probably why, because vCenter, by the way, there's an agent you can install in vCenter that will actually allow you to rip out all the OVFs. So I honestly, I guess at this point, that's why I didn't know what the server migration connector was, because I don't think I've ever installed a free BSD VM on the thing. So that was my bad. So I just want to make sure that in your heads, you remember that the server migration connector is a virtual machine that apparently you install in your on-premise environment, and it will help you basically convert these to OVFs. So one thing I want to point out, because this was also on the exam guide, is that if it comes down to between using Cloud Endure or SMS, just know that Cloud Endure, which is a new company that they bought like a year or 2 ago, will do like DR level replication and cutover. SMS is really built for like cutover migrations. So for example, if someone wants to do an active passive kind of setup, Cloud Endure is going to be the answer. If they literally just want to do a migration and cutover and they don't want to do ongoing DR, SMS is probably going to be what you're going to use. Okay. So just to make the distinctions between Cloud Endure and SMS. They also, by the way, call it the data center migration service. Cloud Endure is also called the data center migration service. It will replicate all of your systems in not near real time over to cloud. And you can literally just cut it over at the time that you want to fail over from one system to the next. This includes data stores and other things. So Cloud Endure is an increasingly popular option that's been popping up on the exam. And it's in the exam guide because when we were looking at it earlier, I noted it. Any other questions here? Isn't it funny? Like, as long as I've been doing this, like there's still tons of stuff you don't know. right? You can't remember it all or it changes, right? Okay. 11:36. So this time I'm going to start a timer so you can actually see it. So on the lower right-hand side, there's a timer now. Okay, here we are, 2.5 minutes later, right? I see some A's. Anybody else want to throw their like vote in? Okay, so question, what is the one qualifier they put on the migration? What's the one thing they asked for?
25 terabyte total size that triggered that, I think I should use the snow.
Oh, but hold on, let's back up before we get into details, right? Is that basically it says, what's the one qualifier they put on you migrating, right? Is they said, look, least downtime. Least amount of downtime, which basically to Barathi's point, no downtime, right? They are looking for the minimal amount of downtime possible. So if we start looking at these other options, because I see AA and then I see C, right? So to say this, D could actually work, right? D could work. Create a snapshot of the on-premise database server, use the VM import service to import the snapshot in AWS. I'm assuming that they're using VMware, right? Provision a new EC2 instance using the imported snapshot, configure replication from the on-database service to the EC2 instance through a VPN connection. Wait until, I mean, that could work, right? But remember, that's going to violate, that's not the easiest way to use AWS because they're not going to prefer that you use virtual machines. They're going to want you to either use PaaS or SaaS, right? So that's going to go with the heaviest management overhead, but that potentially could work. We're also assuming they're using VMware, which it says nothing about them using VMware. So we don't know. So we're going to exclude D because while it could work, it's the heaviest way to use AWS, and we don't know that they're using VMware. So we don't know if that's going to work. Let's look at B for a second. Temporarily stop the on-premise. First of all, no, no. We're not going to stop. I don't even read the rest of that. We're not going to stop the application. That's going to cause tremendous downtime. That directly violates the constraints. I don't need to read the rest of that question. We're done, right? So then that leaves you with the answers that you put, which is A and C. So let's go check this out really quick, and then let's go look and see what the distinctions are between A and C. C and A look remarkably similar, but here's the problem. And Banu, I think you started to call it out, is that there's a 25 terabyte database here. Over VPN, you could probably do the math. It's going to take a second. But that's not a problem for us because that doesn't violate the least downtime constraint. But they got to create the migration in 3 weeks. By the way, if you do the math, I believe that at 10 gigabits of growing per day plus the 25 terabytes, assuming, by the way, there's no chokes against your VPN, because remember, it runs over the internet, so it's going to get choked out by internet weather. You're probably not going to make a 3-week migration time frame. There's some questions there. So then immediately we need to either look at Direct Connect or we need to use the Snowball device, which is built for migration. By the way, just tell me this. How many terabytes can a Snowball device handle? The like standard storage one. Good, Bharathi, I think that might be right, but I think it's 80 terabytes pre-usable. Like I think it's 80 terabytes. Like I think you get like 72 usable, 73 usable. I think it's 80 if I remember correctly. It used to be 50 and 80. Unless they've changed it recently, they definitely, I'm pretty sure they don't have 100 terabyte one. I'm pretty sure it's 80 for the Snowball device. So if we request a Snowball device, that more than covers the 25 terabytes plus whatever extra per day. And then create an export of the server, load it in the Snowball device, then load it into Aurora, and then using the VPN connection, configuring replication. Then when you cut over, you've got the most up-to-date option, right? And that, by the way, can be accomplished within the 3-week period. Because those were the caveats, is that we need the migration done within 3 weeks with the least downtime possible. That's going to be a combination of replication plus an initial seed. The initial seed could happen over VPN, could happen over Direct Connect, but in this case, we're going to use Snowball for that. Is that clear as to why we have to use the Snowball device because of the 3-week limitation?
So one thing, Michael, what if it was like, a 100 Mbps VPN? I just want to understand, when do we go for DMS versus Snowball? Like, how do we choose between these two?
Well, just to say this, Bharathi, is that in general, you're not going to go for VPN. Because running a long transfer like that over time is going to be fraught with peril, to borrow a phrase, right? It's going to be problematic. What if it stops? How do you do retries? Do you do it in parts and parcels? How do you do multi-part uploads? Not just, like there's going to be challenges with that, right? So in general, that's a lot of operational overhead. In general, they're not going to recommend VPN. Now, VPN does have a speed cap. I forget what it is off the top of my head. Maybe they say it down here, actually. Oh, wait, by the way, here it is. 80 terabytes for the Snowball device. Snowball moves terabytes in a week. Maybe it says down here why. You cannot import a 25 terabyte snapshot. Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know you can. Really? Oh, that's right. Yeah, you can't import a 25 terabyte snapshot. That's true. Let's see, replicating an entire 25 terabyte will take several weeks for the replication to catch up, not to mention there'll be additional data. It doesn't actually say. Somewhere in the VPN setup, I want to say it caps out. I want to say it caps out at like 25 megabits or something. But anyway, I can't remember what the number is. But the VPN does cap out at a certain number. But in general, they're not going to want you to use VPN because it's going to be less reliable, more operational overhead, a little bit more costly, especially if you're pulling data. So that's usually the cutoff, is that in general, they don't want you to use VPN for that kind of thing. They want you to use either Direct Connect or the Snowball device.
So for migrations of terabytes of data, Snowball would be the ideal recommended way. That's what.
Yeah, because you can actually get that done within a couple days, actually. A
Okay.
day or two to get the device, a day or two to copy, depending on the volume of data, and then another day or two to send it up. So within a week, you can typically turn that around. Any other qualifiers or questions?
So for Bharati's question, like I mean, just to the DMS, when what will be the ideal scenarios the DMS can be used?
First of all, DMS can always be used, right? Just to say this, and even in this, by the way, the replication from on-premise database server to Aurora DB, that actually is probably using DMS because DMS will work with on-premise systems. So DMS can always be used, especially if it's a homogeneous change like MySQL to MySQL, right? Even with non-homogeneous changes like Oracle to like, for example, DynamoDB, you can actually use DMS, but you have to use the schema conversion tool with that. So in general, DMS can always be at play. Now they didn't call out DMS here unless I missed something, but they just called out general replication, which would work fine, right? In other words, you could use the native replication tools of the database as long as the database engines match. But from my perspective, DMS can always be used for replication. It can be used continuously. It can be used for migration. It can be used to run database backups. If it's just databases we're talking about, and it's not an entire data center, so we're not talking about Cloud Endure, we're not talking about the server migration service, just databases, then DMS can always be used.
Yeah, actually, my question was more related to the migration from on-premises to the cloud. In that scenarios, like I mean, DMS, like now we know that because of 25 terabyte, we went with the Snowball, and we were not considering the other things. But if the options are related to DMS, right, and such scenarios related to on-prem to cloud migration.
Well, I think what I said still applies, right? The reason the VMware import export service won't handle an image import of 25 terabytes. That's the limitation on the service. Plus, honestly, VMware is not listed here, so we don't know. But DMS doesn't have an upper like migration limit. Your only limit on DMS is how much time and bandwidth do you have. So whether it's on premise to cloud or whether it's cloud to cloud, DMS can be used. But remember, the constraints around DMS are how much time do you have to transfer the data that you have. So yeah, am I understanding the question, Lana?
Yes,
still missing?
yeah. Just wanted clarity.
Yeah. So for example, if you were doing DMS with an on-premise system against an in-cloud system like RDS, for example, and you had a 10 gigabit per second direct connect connection, that would be the cap of like how much data you could transfer over whatever period of time is your connection between the two systems, not DMS itself. DMS doesn't care.
And from a cost perspective, would Snowball be cost effective or DMS?
Well, Snowball would be very cost effective for that because there's no data transfer charges for terabytes of data, which is where you start getting into cost electives. I can't remember off the top of my head how much cheaper Snowball is than the standard data transfer. The closer, obviously, you get to 70 terabytes, the cheaper it becomes compared to transferring that data over the wire. So, but I don't remember off the top of my head what the Snowball devices cost. I want to say it's like a couple $100 or something. So, but honestly, I don't remember. But typically the Snowball is going to be cheaper than doing the data transfer. But I just want to point this out though. That's only if you're pulling data, like, because you can pull data out, like put data in, pull data out, obviously. Like when you put data into AWS, you're not going to pay anything for data transfer charges. So maybe my thinking is a little screwy there because I'm thinking about pulling data out of AWS. When you pull data into AWS, actually the Snowball is actually going to be cheap, more expensive, but your transfer over time is going to be quicker. So let me correct what I just said because I was thinking the wrong direction. The Snowball device is going to be more expensive because you're not going to have any data transfer charges to transfer in to AWS. So, but that may not be the factor here. We were looking for least downtime possible, right? So let me correct that. The Snowball is going to be more expensive than putting data in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do one more, maybe two more, and then we'll call it. Because it takes us about 10 minutes to do the explanation, so we'll see. Okay, once again, I'll put up a timer. Let's do it. Okay, here we are. I see two Ds. Anybody want to put their last thing in? Okay. All right. So first of all, I don't know why this is a continuous improvement question. What does this actually seem like it's more appropriate for? What section?
Migration.
Yeah, seems like it's more like a migration question. So hold on one second. Solutions Architecture Pro exam practice. Sorry, I'm creating a playlist for you all so I can just give it to you now so you don't have to wait for me. So first of all, this seems like more like a migration question because there isn't really an existing solution. So I'm not sure what we're improving here. I just took a screenshot of it. I'm gonna send them a quick email. All right, here's the bottom line is that we've got a 10 gigabit connection with all of the, the data centers. That's pretty cool, actually. And then we've got custom VPN between data center network and AWS. They got about 500 physical servers that are a mix of Windows and Linux and database services. They want to decommission these data centers and migrate their entire infrastructure to AWS cloud instead. Okay, so first of all, if we're talking about servers, which of these services are not going to work? A, B, C, or D? So data sync's definitely not going to work. So Banu, dead on. What other one's not going to work?
A.
A is definitely not going to work. Now, I want to throw out something here just so I'm clear about this. If they were using VMware and it says they have vCenter, oddly enough, the application discovery service can be of tremendous use here, but only in giving you information about the boxes, not in terms of migration. So just be aware of that. So if they ever have an inventory question and it talks about using VMware, the application discovery service can actually give you tremendous information about the applications and the environment they're running on. But that has nothing to do with migration. That's an inventory question. So A is out, C is out. So then we're left with SMS and we're left with Cloud Endure migration service. Now, you all put D, which makes total sense. So let's check this out really quick. What's the key distinction that makes the Cloud Endure service better in this particular case? So I mentioned before that it does replication. So someone else tell me, by the way, why Cloud Endure is the better option compared to the SMS answer. Why is D better than B?
Well, we saw earlier that the SMS connector was in a Ubuntu or something Linux image that you would install in a vCenter server. So you can't install that connector on Windows boxes. Like you wouldn't put them on physical hosts.
Well, and it's actually a BSD virtual machine, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, so that doesn't sound like technologically that's going to work, Craig, right? So then, and not only that, this one actually like snaps it and then launches the AMIs, but don't these systems need to work? How's the cutover going to happen? Anyway, those details are remarkably missing. Now, Cloud Endure is built for this kind of thing. It's built for a data center migration, which is exactly what this use case is for, right? So this is a block level replication tool, right? It will basically like source, copy block by block everything you have going on. This is used to lift or shift. This is perfect for this. It's exactly what it's designed for. Now let's look at why. So SMS supports migration, but it doesn't currently support physical infrastructure or other cloud providers. Let's go back to this. Data centers, 500 physical servers. Look at that, right? SMS will only work with virtualization technologies. That's another key distinction to make, is that to Craig's point, you can't install the SMS connector on a physical machine. It can only be installed in a virtualized environment because it's a BSD virtual machine, right? Which is just like it's like a Linux, not Linux. It's a Unix, really. It's not a Linux, it's a Unix. My BSD buddies would hurt me, right? So you can't install that on a physical box. So SMS isn't going to work anyway, right? Now, data sync is really used for replicating data between different data systems. That's it. And application discovery, it gathers information. So it helps you plan, but it does not perform the migration. So ADS would have been perfect if there was an inventory question about a bunch of VMware virtual machines. But again, all of that requires virtualization for the most part access. So Cloud Endure is the only one that will work on any machine, physical or otherwise. Okay. Anybody have any questions as to why that's the right answer?
So regarding the VMware, if the question will be about planning, then we might think about application discovery service, right?
Yes.
But
And
actual
go ahead,
migration SMS.
Right. Migration is either going to be SMS or Cloud Endure, depending on whether it's a virtualized environment or a whole data center, right? So you're absolutely correct. Just my only ask is don't dismiss the application discovery service if it's talking about planning a virtual machine migration. I know the application discovery service has the word application in it, so you're going to immediately think, well, that can't be it because we're migrating virtual machines. But if you want information about the virtual machines, the discovery service is spectacular. If you want to move them, ADS isn't going to work.
Yeah, very true. There will be small word about plan somewhere that will miss.
Good. Okay, so I'm going to post this in the chat. Please grab this, right? This is the YouTube video for this recording right now. So when this recording is done off of Zoom, I'm going to post it against that YouTube playlist and you're going to have it, right? So and if there's any other videos that pop up, like future videos, like with the other classes, they'll also be at that playlist. So even without attending, you automatically have the playlist that has all of the other recordings that are going to be done for the later. And I'm going to use a different review mode set for the later one. So if you ever want to use it for studying, you can, okay? Now it's technically 12 o'clock, so technically we're done. Does anyone have any questions or anything for me before we close?
So the exam tips again, like do you suggest after doing that couple of review tests, getting up to 90, do you suggest the regular test, taking the regular test before attending an exam, or the approach, what should we do?
No, to be very clear, 2 review mode exams at 90% per. If you're really feeling underconfident or you haven't touched AWS infrastructure before, go for 3 or 4. 3 is probably what you would need the most, right? But all you need to do is pass 2 of the review mode set exams at 90%, and you're ready to pass the exam. You can go further if you want to train more. I just want to, like, there's going to be a certain point of exhaustion when you hit work week 3, 4, and 5 of studying, where you're going to be like, I'm kind of done, actually. Okay. So I would just do 2 review mode set exams. If you have 0 production experience or just feeling unconfident, go for a 3rd, or even go for a 4th if you want to, but you really only need 2. This is what we've used in the past to help people get past the exam. So my email address plus the YouTube list is posted. If you have any questions, email me. Usually only takes me a day to get back to you because I'm usually teaching or consulting. So just let me know if you need something. Otherwise, if you post a message in Basecamp, by the way, also, I will usually see it, or one of my cohorts will get back to you. Otherwise, go get studying, do some practice labs, do the practice exams, and then let me know when you pass. Like, let us know. We really love it to hear when you pass. So let us know. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Michael, this is very helpful. Thanks.
Absolutely. It was fun. Thank you. Thank you for playing with me on the practice exams and going through the ins and outs. All right. So have a great Friday, a great weekend, and I'll see you at the next session if you're there. Take care, everyone.
All right, thanks.